Hi, my name is Brandon Graysley. I'm a high school computer science teacher, and we're working on the libGDX Java game library, working on this space shooter game. Let me just press play here to show you what we completed last time. We worked on getting a background in place that scrolled, and now we have a multi-layer or parallax scrolling background. Just want to mention that in the game screens render background method, I did improve that a little bit by changing the background so that it's 4 images that are twice as tall instead of smaller images which you draw twice. Anyway, it's a little bit faster to render. The images are a little bigger, and you're going to see that a little bit later today. So today's goal is to include both enemy and player spaceships and shields to go on top of them. And we're going to make some changes to the way we are doing our images here. So first thing I want you to do is go to kenny.nl and go to this URL here, assets/spaceshooter-redux. And you can find this list of free game assets. You can tell they're free. They're CC0, which is public domain. Download that. And I've got them here. And I'll just give you an example. Let's look at the preview here. All of these different spaceships that are available. So we're going to use, for example, this reddish one here and a blue one for the player ship. The other thing we'll need is a texture packer, which will help us combine our images together into one large image. You can get that from Crash Invaders on GitHub. Scroll down into these details here to the releases page. And you can download any of these depending on your operating system, and you can just download this zip file if you want to. That's what I've done right here. And oops. And so you'll have these files to work with. What we're going to do is choose some of these different ships and things that we want to use in our game, and we're going to copy them over to this assets folder that we already have, the Android assets. So first of all, I'll just look at this visually. Let's go and choose a player ship. I think I want to use this blue one right here. So I'm just going to copy that into that folder. And let's go up to enemies. I want that kind of reddish orange one. This one, I think, number 3. Okay, so far so good. And under effects, there's a shield here. They're a little hard to see because they're transparent. I'm going to pick shield 1 and shield 2, one for the player and one for the enemy. And while we're at it, let's go into lasers. We'll get some lasers. That's a laser for me, and then a laser for the enemy. It's okay if they're different sizes, that doesn't really matter. Copy them over. Okay, so those are all the images that I want to use, including my original Starscape images. So let's go and use this texture packer. It will combine all of these images into one single large image. The reason we do that is that loading an image file is resource intensive, and it uses up a lot of space in memory. But if you load a bunch of separate files, that's very costly. But if you load one file and then just use portions of it, that's actually a lot cheaper. So that's why we do that differently. I'm sorry, I should tell you what I'm doing here. So in this pack list, we're going to make a series of packs. We're just going to make one pack for our game. Choose the new pack button. Let's call it images. Press OK. We need to choose the output directory. So in my case, Android, Java, Space Shooter, Android assets. This is the folder that we put all of our assets in. You don't type a file name, just press OK. And then over here are a whole bunch of settings. We just have a couple that we have to worry about. The max page width and max page height. Normally this is fine, but we have these background images that are very large. So I'm just going to crank those all the way up. A couple more. I don't need any padding. That would put some space around things. And everything else I think is fine. We need to choose the files that we're going to pack right here, add input files, and I'll select all of these files, including the background images and all of the other ones that I chose. Press open. Now we can go up here to this tiny icon that says pack. Okay, and we're finished. All of our images were packed into a 0.47 megabyte image. Took about 30 seconds. And you can see here as you cursor over this image where all of the images are. There's the Starscape, number 1, 2, and 3. Oh, down here, shield and some lasers. Let me zoom in on that. they're kind of just tucked away in here, and it doesn't really matter where they are. We're just going to grab things as we need them according to their names. So I can close this. I don't even need to save it. Now in my textures area, or sorry, my assets area, you'll see these two new files. One is a PNG file. I'll load it up. The little ships and the lasers and so on. And the other is an atlas file. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Look at it in Notepad here. Name of the file to open, the size of the file, and then you can see here these are the names of the files without extensions that I've used in the texture. It tells you where they are and so on. There's a bunch of details about how to find the right images as sort of subsets or little pieces of this larger image. And in fact, we don't need any of this stuff anymore. We can get rid of all of those and just use these, use this image atlas, it's called. Okay, we're ready to get started. So let's head into our game screen file. And we're going to make a few changes here. First of all, this backgrounds thing, let's go just above that and create a private, call it a TextureAtlas. And I'll call it TextureAtlas. Now the backgrounds, instead of being textures, they're now going to be texture regions. A texture region is a portion of a texture or a portion of an image. So we're going to need to make some changes further down to reflect that. Let's see what else we're going to need. We'll have to have a texture region for each of our visual objects on the screen. So for now, we're going to have these ones: player ship texture, player shield texture. I'm sorry, I'm calling them textures. They should be called, I should call them texture regions. Enemy ship texture region and enemy shield texture region. And we could do lasers too. Maybe I'll throw those in there for right now. Player laser texture region, enemy laser texture region. Okay, so we have a whole bunch defined like this. In a large game, you wouldn't necessarily do this in quite this way, but this is fine for what we're going to do in this game. Okay, that's it for that. We have timing and world parameters are still all the same. We're going to need one more thing. Maybe I'll put it down here. We're going to need a place to have some game objects, and for now we're just going to have a player ship and an enemy ship. I think I'll come back to that though. Let's go down and fix up what we've done with our background here. Before we actually start setting up the background, we need to set up the TextureAtlas. So think of it like a little book that you look up textures in. So our TextureAtlas is a new TextureAtlas. And we just have to give it the file name, which is called images.atlas. I'll show you that up here. Android assets images.atlas. That's that file. Now, backgrounds is not a new texture anymore. It's a new texture region. And when we did this before, we would grab the texture. We would create a new texture object. We're not going to do that anymore. Instead, we're going to say TextureAtlas dot find region, and we'll give it the name that we're looking for. Starscape 00 is the first one. Notice I didn't put the PNG on there anymore. So let's do the same thing for these other ones. Actually, I think what I'll do is just copy and paste that. Press my insert key and start overwriting all of these values. Oops. So that one's fine. 1, I did it again, 2, and 3. Press insert again. Okay, so that will retrieve the portions of that large image that are the right ones to fill in these background sections. So if I press play now, I think everything is still fine. The way we print stuff with a batch, doesn't matter whether we give a texture or a texture region, everything's the same. I think we're probably okay. Let me just press play and double check. Okay, so far everything looks the same. All we've done is changed from textures to texture regions by using a texture atlas. Okay, so now the ships. We're going to need to add in ship textures. We need a place to use those. So what we're going to do now is create an object, a new object that will represent ships. So under core Java and the package name, choose new, not package, choose new class, Java class. And we're going to call it ship. And it can be package private. And that's all. So far, a ship is going to contain information about a ship object. So first we'll need some ship characteristics. And we'll need some position and dimension information. And we'll need some graphics information. So all of these are going to be field variables that every ship has to know about itself. So I'm thinking ahead here that a ship is going to be able to move. So we're going to need a float for their movement speed. And that's going to be in world units per second. I'm not using pixels or anything like that. We're using our own unit system for the world. And I think of it in meters. And that way we don't have to worry about screen size and things when we're doing our calculations here. I want another int that represents the amount of shield that the ship has remaining. For position, we're going to need a couple of values. We need the x position and the y position. And that's going to be for the lower left corner. I'm deciding to do it that way because that's how images are printed on the screen, like with that batch draw command. You don't have to do it that way. You could keep track of the center, I suppose, but I'm going to do it like this. And we'll also need a float for the width and the height of the ship. Under graphics, well, we're going to need a texture region for the ship texture and another one for the shield texture as well. So I'm going to choose generate constructor. And let's just go through and check each one that we really want to know. Movement speed and shield, we need both of those. We need to know where to put it. We need to know the width and the height. And yeah, looks like we need everything. All of those things would have to be told to the object before it can be created. So there we go. We've got a huge constructor ready to go. I'm just going to kind of press enter a couple of times here to make it easier to read. So movement speed and shield amount, position, width, and height. Now this position here, that could be confusing. I actually think I want to change how I define that here. I'm going to have the center position, center of the ship is what's sent in rather than the lower left corner. That's going to be nicer for some stuff later on. You don't have to do this, it's not that big a deal. But if you do, we'll need to make a quick change. We take the x center and then we subtract the width divided by 2, right? So I'm only really, height this time. I'm only storing the lower left corner, but when I create the ship, I'm passing in the center. That's on purpose. We'll see later how that works. It's not essential if you don't want to do it this way. That's totally fine. Okay. Textures are all saved. Height and width are all saved. Movement speed is saved. The next thing we're going to need to do is create a draw command, a draw method that can be used with this ship. And then what we're going to do is we will receive a batch. The batch will be passed to the ship, and then the ship will kind of tell the batch how to draw itself. The reason to do it this way is that I want to do multiple draw commands, batch draw commands, to draw the ship and its shield together. And so passing the batch into the ship is easier than trying to sort of send back what to draw. So two things, we do batch.draw. I want to draw the ship texture. Where do I do that? X position, that's the lower left corner. Y position, and then the width and the height. You can see why storing the center is not as helpful as storing the lower left corner. And that's all actually. One more thing now, if there's a shield, that is if the shield value is greater than 0, there is some shield left, I also want to draw the shield. You'll notice I'm drawing the shield second because I want it to show up kind of on top of the ship, not underneath it. And I'm just going to put X position, Y position, width, and height here as well. So we have the ship is drawn, then the shield is drawn. That's what happens in the draw command. Okay, we are ready to go back to the game screen and actually create our ship objects now and get them all set up to draw. So back in the game screen class, we had a spot set up for some field variables for game objects, and we're going to make a couple of them right now. I'm going to make a player ship. Oops, I'm sorry, I should call it of type ship called player ship, and I'll need another one. For now, we're just going to have a single enemy ship. Later we'll have more than one, and so this will become a different type. So for now, 2 ships. Let's go into the game screen constructor. After the background stuff, I think I'll set up the game objects. Player ship equals new ship. Now we have to give it a whole bunch of parameters. So the movement speed, I'm just going to put in some numbers here that are helpful. 2, 3 for the shield. The width I'm going to make 10, the height is 10. Where do I want to, what did I put first? I put the center first, I'm sorry. I think I want to change that. I don't like that. I'm going to change the order here. Center stuff needs to be afterwards. That's better. Width, height, center, center. That's better. So movement speed, shield, width is 10, height is 10. The center I would like to be kind of 3/4 of the way down the screen. We count everything from the bottom up, so it's kind of 1/4 of the way from the bottom, and in the center horizontally. So I'm going to use world width divided by 2 for the X center, and I'll use world height divided by 4 for the Y center. That'll be 1/4 of the way from the bottom up. Then I need to put in the ship texture, player ship texture region, and the player shield texture region. And I think that's everything. Let me just space that out a little more. Okay. I think we're all good there now. We're going to do the very same thing for the enemy ship with some couple of changes. The enemy ship will be a new ship, same movement speed. I think I'm going to give it only 1 shield. Width and height are the same. The X center is the same. The Y center, though, I don't want it 1/4 of the way from the bottom. I want it 3/4 of the way. So I'll multiply by 3 and divide by 4, multiplying by 3/4, using the enemy ship texture region and the enemy shield texture region. Okay, so we have game objects. We just have to display them on the screen. Inside of our render method, we have our background first. We have to do everything from the back to the front. So I think I'll do enemy ships, then the player ship, then lasers, and later we're going to have explosions. So starting with the enemy ship, I will do enemy ship dot draw, and I pass it the batch to work with. And then player ship dot draw and the batch to work with as well. And then we would have some lasers and so on to draw. Okay, I think we're ready there. Let me just give it a try. Well, I made a mistake. If I look back here and look, Android Studio is warning me, these are always null, these values. These were not initialized. I forgot to initialize the textures for the ships and so on. So let's talk about that now. Initialize texture regions. So we need the player ship texture region. Go to the TextureAtlas, find the region called. Now for the player ship, look at, I deleted it already. I'll have to go look it up in the atlas to see which ones I wanted. So in the atlas I have my starscapes. I had player ship 2_blue. That was the name of it. No .png at the end, that's gone. Okay, let me just copy this and paste it a few times, because we'll have to do our other stuff too. Enemy ship texture region. We need the player shield texture region. Enemy shield texture region. And let's do the player laser texture region and the enemy laser texture region. Okay, all of these names though are going to change. So the enemy ship was called enemy red 3. The player's shield, I had 2 shields. I had numbers 1 and 2, I think. Yeah, shield 1 is going to be the enemy, so shield 2 is the player. That was what I was thinking, at least. And the lasers were called laser red 3 and laser blue 3. So the player was blue and the enemy was red. Okay, now let's give it a whirl. All right, textures are ready. So I've got enemy up here with, oh, it's really difficult to see that shield, but the player's shield looks good. That's because the enemy's shield is upside down, and it's not in a great spot either. So we have a couple of options for how to fix this. We can either tell Java, please turn this thing around, flip it over, or rotate it. Or another option is to go and just change the original image so that it faces the other way. I'm going to show you how to change it here in Java, although it really might be just easier to go and change the original image. So the enemy shield texture region right here, there's a command you can call on it, enemy shield texture region dot flip, and you can say whether to flip it in the X direction, no, or the Y direction, yes. So I've flipped that, so every time we print out an enemy shield, this shield 1 texture, it'll be flipped over now. We just flipped it once at the very beginning. You can also flip it directly when you want to print it or display it. Oh, I didn't quit the other one. Okay. Okay, it's not in a great spot either, so you might want to add a little bit of code to move it around or adjust the images so they show up in a different place or make them bigger somehow. There's lots of options for how you change how this thing looks. One of the easiest things to do really at this point is probably just to move it down a little bit, which I can show you here. Let's go back to the ship class. In here, we could do something like the Y position, subtract a little bit from it if it's an enemy ship, and I think that's probably the kind of thing we'll want to do next time when we make new classes for enemy and player ships. Okay, so we've done a lot today. We've got texture regions and a texture atlas instead of using a whole bunch of individual textures, and we've also created a class for the ship that keeps track of a bunch of stuff, and we'll be able to keep track of more things. For example, how much shield is left and how often are the lasers going to be shooting. That'll all come next time. Okay, thanks very much. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask me in the comments. Talk to you later.